Hi, everybody. Whitney with Girl Friday Crafts here. Welcome to week 2 of our 6 weeks to organized course. Super excited to have you back and keep going along with this content. So we're just going to jump right in here. Last week, we talked a little bit about finding your why beyond just the need to get organized, but connecting that to increase productivity or how much more you'll enjoy your space, anything like that. I encouraged you to write that down, vision board it if you're a vision board person, but in some way, articulate that. So if you did that, I would love to hear what your why is. I shared mine in the Facebook group, why I wanted to do this course particularly right now. Part of your homework for week 1 was the what's working, not working handout. We don't want to fix what's working, right? So we don't want to inadvertently change a system that's working for you. So articulating those things is important. Also, that what's not working is a way to help you get clearer on your why if you were struggling with that. And then also there was a worksheet on analyzing your obstacles. So one of the things that I know to be true from my own experience in getting and staying organized is really understanding the forces at play in your life that might be preventing you from getting where you want to be. And those are broken up into 3 categories: the practical concerns, the outside realities, and the emotional and mental barriers. So that worksheet had you walk through all of those areas. So if you still haven't done that yet, no problem. There's still time. We're going to talk a little bit more about it today. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is a little more about those 3. And then we're going to talk about strategy. So again, one more week before we jump into the real work here. But there's a little bit of thinking and planning that has to be done in order to do this effectively. And our goal here is not just to quickly get organized, but set up systems that will help you stay that way. And that's part of the important part. That's the important part of thinking about it a little bit and having a little strategy session. So we're going to do that today. So we're going to start off, and I actually do have slides today. We're going to just start off talking about these practical concerns. We'll talk about 4 and 5, complex and confusing systems and out of sight, out of mind today. The remainder will actually get dealt with more in weeks 3 and 4 when we talk about sorting and decluttering our supplies, as well as assigning them a home. So that will address some of those other ones. So we're going to actually go a little bit out of order. I wanted to bring these up onto the screen and kind of remind you what they were, and also acknowledge I'm not ignoring them. They were on that worksheet and they're important, but they're very much connected to the nitty-gritty of the work that we're going to do in future weeks. So just wanted to highlight them and let you know when we're going to be circling back around to those. And then we have the outside realities. So in the Facebook group or in your email, you have a link to some documents that do a deeper dive into these outside realities. So I posted the PDF in the Facebook group, and then in your email with the link to today's lesson, I shared with you a link to access this PDF as well, in case you weren't in the Facebook group or couldn't access it that way. And we're going to talk a little bit about this today. I'm not going to go through all of it. I hate when trainings are nothing but reading material that I've already received. And so I definitely don't want to do that. But I wanted to share this, and this is all from Julie Morgenstern's book, the Organizing from the Inside Out, that I talked about in week 1. But I wanted to touch base on a little bit of these to help spur your thinking about it, acknowledge a couple of things, and then let you know what lines up with what. So the other thing that you got in your email was a link to a different version of the Analyzing Challenges worksheet, and it's a crosswalk. So it takes like what you answered for this section and lines it up with what's on the PDF. So for example, if you answered true to questions 1, 2, and 3 on the outside realities, which were, let me just reference back to those real quick. You recently started your own business, your business is undergoing a major growth spurt, or you're a working parent also taking care of an aging parent or other family member. That connects to unrealistic workload. Speed of life technology connects to questions 4, 5, and 6 on the worksheet. So pressure to respond instantly to things, constant interruptions, deadline-driven environment, so on and so forth. So you can look at how you answered that those questions in that worksheet and then line it up with the sections here. How you address these is going to vary from situation to situation and person to person. So I can't really give a blanket answer on, okay, if you have an unrealistic workload, this is how you handle it. I am more than happy to talk about it, how any of these resonate for you further in the Facebook group. So if you have a question, you can post it in the group or share which one resonates for you. And we can circle back around to that in the group. We can do that in the live Q&A. If it's more personal, happy to, kind of work with you more individually. You can DM me on Facebook or email me. It's Whitney@girlfridaycrafts.com. And we can try to dig into some of those. But I'm bringing them into the training space to raise awareness of these issues, because sometimes we're so immersed in it that we can't see clearly how it's impacting really all the areas of our lives, right? If you have an unrealistic workload, that impacts so many things, not just your relationship to your physical space. But that's the goal of this course, right? Is to talk about that. And so gaining an awareness of it, even if you can't quite see clearly how to resolve it, the awareness of it gives you a little bit of grace, helps you understand why this is a particular challenge in your life right now. And then might help you start to recognize ways that you can do things differently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what resonates for me here in just a minute. I also wanted to let you know that number 11 on the outside realities is limited space. And we'll discuss that one in particular next week, in week 3, when we talk about sorting and destashing our supplies. These are not necessarily mutually exclusive categories. So just because you might not have answered true to the speed of life or tech questions, if, for example, 4, 5, and 6, doesn't mean that section isn't worth reviewing. Skim it, see what pops out at you. But if you're digging deep, then I would start with, where did you answer true? Because those things obviously bubbled up enough for you to look at that worksheet and go, yep, that speaks to me. Also wanted to acknowledge, and I mentioned this in the Q&A from the Facebook group last week, not a criticism, just I was surprised. Before I did this training, I bought the most recent edition of this book to make sure I had the most up-to-date information. And I was a little surprised that this speed of life technology section has not really been updated. So if you read it, she talks about faxes, she talks about periodicals, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, and for a lot of people that I talk to in relationship to organization and time management, it's text messages, it's social media, Facebook Messenger, it's obviously email, but it's different. The things that are difficult for us to stay up to date with, or are the constant, you need to pay attention to me, you need to pay attention to me, is different than what she references in the book, and it's a different type of challenge for sure. And there are definitely ways to handle those things. But again, it's going to be different for everybody. Not everybody can put their phone on do not disturb when they're working on a project. If you have small children who are at school, or if you have an ailing parent or family member who might be, receiving care in a long-term facility or in the hospital, you need to be reachable. And so it involves a next layer of understanding how to silence messages so that you don't miss the ones that you really need to get. We can, again, if somebody has real specific questions about that, and that's a real challenge, let's dig deep into that into the Facebook group, or you can, again, you can message me or email me. But I've spent a lot of time actually recently in my day job talking with my team about how do we minimize distractions in order for us to be able to get things done. And so we've talked a lot about using our out of office to say, we're working on a project. I'll get back. I'm working on a project. I'm unavailable right now. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, or silencing some notifications on our phones during certain times, even just closing down our email when we're trying to work on something. So those are things, to think about, but everybody's situation is real different. I did want to, because I can personalize it for my own situation, I did want to talk a little bit about what is resonating for me right now, which is the unrealistic workload and being in transition. So I mentioned this in week 1, and I think I talked about it a little bit in the Facebook group on Saturday, that even though I have started, even though in the second year, hit 2-year mark for my business back in August, and of course that was completely my choice, I'm really just now starting to understand the implications that has had on my time and space. Not on my time, I've done that, but the implications that has on my space, and trying to figure out how to deal with that. Because as a business owner, it's very different than just as a hobbyist crafter, in terms of how much I have, what I need to have accessible, what I no longer probably need, because the reality is I'm probably not going to use it, and recognizing that and being okay with that. And then also the end transition, that is a transition. For the workload piece of it, my day job is a very high level job, and it's a very demanding job. And so you have those two pieces together, trying to manage a day job and a business. And then, the transition, switching the focus of your business. I'm not really switching the focus, but again, trying to add not really focus, but add new elements. So adding, again, this organizing element, right? It's a new way for me to think about the business. So it is a transition piece. I mean, I do think the unrealistic workload is probably the biggest thing for me. And once again, I am in a place where I have overcommitted myself for the next probably 4 to 5 weeks. And I'm trying to work through that. I'm trying to figure out, what can I say no? What can I take off my plate? What can I push to, mid-October when things will let up a little bit. And also trying to learn how to stop feeling like I have to say yes to everything. But that's my own internal struggle. Like I said, I did it to myself, but that's the thing that's resonating for me right now in terms of the the outside realities. I'm going to go back to the slides here. The next set of our obstacles that we were looking at analyzing was the emotional and mental barriers. And, I'm going to continue to preface these conversations by acknowledging that some of this is heavy stuff. Some of this might be things that you are not ready to address or deal with, that this is not intended to make that more difficult or challenging for anybody. It's an awareness raising activity. It's trying to help us connect the dots between any of these situations or life circumstances and our relationship to our physical space. It's okay if you're not ready to address these issues right now. Getting and staying organized does not require that, you go to therapy to address childhood issues. But having an awareness of the issue does help. And again, speaking from my own experience, the three that resonate here for me are the need for abundance, conquistador chaos, and sentimental attachment. And I talked a little bit about that in the Facebook group as well on Saturday. I don't think I talked about the need for abundance piece, so I can speak to that now. I grew up low income, single mom working 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make sure that, we could pay rent and food and clothes and for me to go to good schools and all the things. So, there wasn't that ability for me to have the in shoes or jeans or purse or, whatever it might be. I didn't have birthday parties where, all my classmates got to come over and we went to and had a pizza party, or we went roller skating, or, we did the things that were popular when I was a kid, because the money just wasn't there to be able to pay for those things. And that's fine. That taught me, I'm okay with that. It taught me a lot about being resilient and appreciating the things that I have. But what the flip side of that has done is, my husband and I make good money. And, without too much problem, I can buy almost anything I might want at any given point in time. I'm not talking, several $1,000 purchases, but, if I don't know, I can't even think of an example, but if I need a new laptop, like when I needed a new laptop, I was able to buy a very nice laptop without really having to think much about it, because we had the money to be able to do that. I can buy whatever I want at Target when I go to Target. I can buy whatever I want from the craft stores when I go to the craft stores. And, I recognized, took me a while, but I recognized within myself that a little bit of my buying habits come from the fact that when I was growing up, I couldn't do those things, and I can do them now. So I do it because I can, not necessarily because it's a real need. And that just leads to an accumulation of stuff. And so I'm still working through the actual issues, but having an awareness of, especially the sentimental attachment piece, has made a huge difference on my ability to think about how I relate to my physical space. So I shared in the Facebook group also that my stepdad passed away 5 years ago. When he passed away, my mother not only had all of his things, but she inherited the piece of land that his parents' home sat on. It was a 150-year-old family farmstead. And everything from generations had been handed down to them and stored in this house. And my stepdad hadn't dealt with any of it. So it had sat for 10 years without really anybody doing anything to it. And so not only were we having to clean out his things, and he had hoarding tendencies, we also had to clean out the farm. And there's a lot of things that as I'm going through stuff and recognizing that I need to create space because I have a business now that I have supplies for, I'm looking at things that I took when he passed away. I'm like, it was a sentimentality grab. It was I want my hands on anything that was his, and things that I don't have a need for, or that I look at now and I'm like, I don't even remember why I would have wanted this. And so, giving myself, knowing that I attach sentimentality to stuff and recognizing that it's just stuff, it's not him, helps me recognize that, okay, I'm in this place now where emotionally I'm able to let go of some of these things or think about them differently. And I can give myself permission to give things away. Doesn't stop me in the moment necessarily, but it does make it easier because I recognize that I'm attaching sentimentality to this, and it's not this, right? It's him and the memories and things like that. And those aren't embedded in this shirt. Doesn't mean I'm getting rid of all of the shirts. I'm not. Some of them I wear, some of them I want to make pillows or a quilt or something out of. But I don't need to keep all of the ones that I've taken. I don't need 30 of them necessarily. So working through that, recognizing that is a thing for me, helps me when I am trying to work through the decluttering and destash sort of process. Knowing all of these things about the mental and emotional barriers means that more often than not now, my challenges around organizing have more to do with the practical concerns than these things, because I have more of an awareness of them now. Not to say they still don't get in my way, they do, but I don't think it's definitely not as big of an issue now that I have identified and gotten more comfortable with them. Similar to the outside realities in this crosswalk document, these are not the be all end all. So look at how you answered and review the relevant sections. And I've done the same thing in the crosswalk. So I've taken the question, and you'll see in bold and parentheses which barrier it connects to. But just give the titles of any of the other sections and see if there's something that makes you go, huh, and read that and see what speaks to you. There might be more that you can connect with. If you're comfortable, you can certainly share in the Facebook group which one of these or if any of these have resonated with you and what this makes you think about, or how this helps you gain an awareness of what you might need to do differently when you're thinking about organizing your physical space. If you're not comfortable putting it out there, but you want to share with somebody, again, you can DM me or email me. If you have a specific question that you don't want to put out there, but you would like an answer to, you can communicate that to me directly, and I can pull it into the Q&A for this week or any future weeks, without sharing anything about who asked. Happy to do that. Definitely want to make sure people are getting their questions answered more than anything else. And, privacy and autonomy are important on social media. And so I'm definitely not going to violate any of that. Okay, so let's talk strategy. So now we're really, we've done the prep work, we've done a little bit of the pre-thinking. This is one more sort of prep stage before we get into the actual meat of things. So this addresses practical concerns 4 and 5, really. Complex, confusing systems and out of sight, out of mind. So in week 1, when we were talking about myths and misconceptions, one of the things that I shared is that being organized and being clutter-free are not exactly the same thing. You can have clutter and still be organized because there might be a system to that clutter. And I use the example of bills or papers, piled on the island in the kitchen. If you know what's there, that's an organizational system. It might not make sense to anybody else, but it doesn't have to. It only really needs to make sense to you and the people who, are impacted by it in your home. Talked a little bit about my bedroom when I was in high school. Couldn't see the floor. Could not see the floor. Never put anything away. Knew exactly where everything was. I could find things in 30 seconds or less. Not a great system, not a visually appealing system, which can be an issue. I don't want to ignore the fact that visual appeal is important, but it was still a system. So organization is about being able to find the things you need when you need them. If your system is too complicated to remember where you are putting things, there's no logical train of thought. Or if you have to keep everything out so you can see it and you know where it is, you are lacking a usable system. And so this is where the complex, confusing systems also can connect a little bit to the I don't know where to put things. So there might not be a system at all, right? Things just go in the first available space. So that's a complex, confusing system in the fact that there really isn't one. Don't want to ignore that's a piece of the puzzle. There's no one way. There's no right way. It's a very personal choice. And there's definitely more than just one or two ways of thinking about this. But I am going to focus on 2, again, that I know to be true for me, that I know to be true for other people, and that are probably the most practical and easily applicable when you're talking about crafting supplies and spaces. And that is to think about setting up your space in activity zones, or what Julie Morgenstern refers to as the kindergarten model. And the other one is to organize supplies by type. Now you can blend those 2 together. They're absolutely not mutually exclusive. But the activity zones, I'm going to talk about that specifically for a second, might not apply if you have a small space. If you're operating, if your dining room table is your craft space, having different zones is not really realistic. Or even if your craft room, if you have a room all to yourself, if it's very small, having different zones set up for activities might not really work. It also might not make the most sense if you only engage in a few crafting types. So that's me, right? I'm predominantly a paper crafter, repurposing surfaces, which involves a little bit of painting, but I don't paint on canvas, right? So I don't need an easel or, a place for, wet paintings to dry. I don't sew. I do cross stitch and stuff like that, but most of the time I do that sitting on the couch in the living room watching TV. But I have a sewing machine. I don't use it very often, so I don't need a sewing zone. It's not worth the effort to create that for me. I don't do any sort of woodworking. I don't have a laser cutter or anything like that. So most of my crafting can be done at my desk. And so I don't really need zones. But if you're somebody who does all the things, if you paint and you sew or quilt and you paper craft and you do laser cutting or any sort of woodworking or anything like that, and you have the space, thinking about organizing your space by zones might be a worthwhile way to think about it. So can you set up your space so that you have a designated area for each kind of activity? So can you have a painting zone and a sewing zone and a paper crafting zone? If you can, if you're watching this training and you're thinking about it and you're going, yeah, that makes sense, and I think I could actually do that in my space, then your homework for this week is to try to start to sketch that out or write it out. You don't have to draw it, but start to think about, okay, so it would make most sense if my painting zone went here, and my paper crafting, okay, so that's going to be my desk, and I have a set up my sewing machine on a table here. And then you have to think about, do you have space for the necessary supplies to be in that zone? Because that's kind of the whole point as well. So if you have a painting zone, not only do you want a setup that will allow you to paint in that zone, but you want your supplies in that zone. So do you have room for a small bookshelf or drawers where you can store your paints and your paintbrushes? Is there a place for you to keep your canvases that is close by? Same if you have a sewing zone. Okay, so you need a place for a sewing table and a chair, but you need a place to store ribbon and fabric and thread and needles and scissors and buttons and zippers and all the things that that go along with that. Now, having a sewing table with drawers and stuff eliminates a big piece of that, takes care of a big piece of that, but may not take care of it entirely. So it's not just the place to do the actual activity, but also to store the things that coincide with that. Now, if your space is small and you can set up zones for doing the activity, there's no reason not to do that. We just have to think logically about where do you store your supplies so that they're not too terribly far away, which is really about the cleanup more than the getting it all out, because we don't mind the getting it all out. We don't like the cleaning it all up. So we want to make that as easy as possible. So if activity zones is something that might be feasible for you, then your homework between now and next week is to think about that and start to write it down, make yourself notes, take pictures of your space, look for things that you might need. Don't buy anything yet. Don't buy anything yet. Look for things that you might need. Do you need a different kind of sewing table, or, would you need a different chair for your easel, to sit and paint or anything like that? So start to think that through. The other way is to sort supplies by type. So this should be applicable despite how much space you have. And again, if your crafting activities are only a couple of things and are predominantly done like on a desk, regardless of what kind of desk it is, this might be the more logical strategy for you. So in this, you're storing so all of your papers are stored together, whether it's scrapbook paper, rice paper, transfer paper, anything like that. But paper is all in the same place. All of your fabric is together. If you're a paper crafter and you have stickers and brads and buttons and things that you use for embellishments, all of those things are stored together. Now, that doesn't mean stickers with brads, but it means all your brads are together, all your stickers are together, all your ribbon, is stored together. In weeks 3 and 4, we're going to dive one step deeper into this and talk about the Totally Tiffany method. So paper crafters, you might know what I'm talking about. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's okay. We'll get into it. But this is a way to further organize within the supply type, but gives you some consistency across all of that. So you're storing things in the same way. And so you don't have to constantly think about, okay, well, how are my buttons stored versus how are my papers stored? It's all stored the same way. And we'll get, like I said, we'll get into that. I'll digress, and we'll be here all day if I start talking about it now, because I don't have it written out in a way that will help me just keep to what's relevant. I could talk about this for hours, but I don't want to do that. So we'll get into that in weeks 3 and 4 when we talk about sorting and destashing. Well, actually, no, it'll be weeks 3 and weeks 3 and 4. Sorry, when we talk about sorting and assigning a home. You might already have some of your supplies organized this way, and you just need to refine it. And so you may be going, okay, well, I have some stuff like this, but not everything. So start to think about that and start to think about, okay, well, I have all my papers together, but my fabrics are divided by, I don't know, whether it's a sewing fabric or something you use for refinishing or repurposing, right? So you have your quilting stuff over here, but like fabric you use in other types of crafting might be over here. I'm going to encourage you to think about putting all of that together, and then you can kind of subcategorize within that. So just let that roll around in your brain for a little bit. If you have thoughts or ideas or questions, make sure you jot those down if this is the strategy that you think is going to work for you. Love it for people to share those. I'll talk about that when we talk about wrapping up, but just think about how that would look for you, and make sure you jot those notes down so you don't forget. Then the last part of the strategy is, what is your reward? So, of course, the reward is more organized space, but we are often more motivated by an extrinsic reward that will help keep us going when this gets sort of challenging. So is there a supply or a tool that you've been wanting? Get yourself a massage or a pedicure, dinner at a special restaurant. Like, what is going to keep you going when you're in the destash portion of the work and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore? Because trust me, that is so going to happen. But you have identified a reward, you've communicated that to someone who's going to hold you accountable, or you've even had someone who has offered, okay, you get X done and I will take you to dinner, at this restaurant, or I will get you a pedicure at your favorite spot. What is it that's gonna motivate you to keep moving forward, aside just from knowing that you're gonna have a space that is more user friendly and that you're going to enjoy working in more. So think about that, write it down, share it with someone, and ask that person to hold you accountable. You can certainly ask people in the group to hold you accountable. We can absolutely do that. I need to set something up for myself for, me working through this process. I did just buy something that I need for the craft room, and that was part of it, was my reward, because I'm not setting it up until I get to a place where I can actually use it. And it's kind of driving me crazy right now because I want to set it up, but it wouldn't be helpful for me if I were to put it together right now. And I'll share that with you guys next week. But I need to come up with something for myself, because there is a little bit of that. Yep, this is going to keep me going. Oh, that slide wasn't supposed to be in there. All right. Okay, so Homework for next week. Your analyzing challenges worksheet, if you haven't done that yet, I want you to think about your strategy and decide what you think is going to work best for you. I'd love it if you would share that in the Facebook group. If you have something different than what we talked about today, so if your strategy is going to be different than the activity zones or organizing your supplies by type, I would love to hear that. Absolutely share that out in the group, because somebody else might be struggling to come up with a strategy, and the way you're going to approach it might be exactly what they need. And then decide on your reward. Also, would love for you to share that in the group, not only because we can celebrate when we get to the end and you get to earn that reward, but also because it might spur other people to think about what would be a good reward for me for this or for that. Next week is when we start getting into the actual work. So we're going to start talking about sorting and destashing supplies. Don't let the word destash freak you out, but there is a reality that for those of us who are in what Totally Tiffany calls the got a lot category, 80% of the time, 85% of the time, really getting on top of your physical space requires getting rid of some things. It just does. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a way that is not going to make you feel wasteful, that's not going to make you feel like you're letting go of something that you're going to regret. There's definitely ways to do that. Okay, I hope to see you in the Facebook group. If you haven't joined yet, I would love to have you. We're going to be doing our next live Q&A next weekend, probably Saturday. I need to check my calendar. I have an appointment and I don't remember what time it is, so I don't want to set this until I figure that out. But that will also be available on replay, as was last week's Q&A. If you have any questions, please post them in the group, DM me on Facebook. Make sure you let me know that you're in the course, just in case I'm not recognizing names, or email me at whitney@girlfridaycrafts.com, and I will be sure to answer and, share your question in the group, because if you have a question, guaranteed somebody else does as well. So, definitely want to get all of that information out there to help everybody along in the process. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging with me. I know probably everybody's really anxious to get into the actual nitty-gritty of the work. So I hope these past 2 weeks have felt useful at this point. But I think as we go along, you'll start to see the connections about why I set it up this way and why I spend, the first couple of hours of this training talking about some of this pre-work kind of stuff, because we're going to be pulling back to these things as we're thinking about sorting and destashing and assigning a home and all of the rest of it. So I hope you have a great week. I hope to see you in the Facebook group, and I will be back with you next Monday.